I used to never even use the word feelings. Like, I don't got no feelings. What you talking about? So now I say, this is how you made me feel. We talk about everything. We don't go to bed angry at each other. So I would say, hands down, it's us communicating. We've been together for 24 years, since 2000, since high school, married for 15.
That's a long time. That's a long time.
He wouldn't even say feelings. Now he's out here crying on podcasts.
Right. He's Jesus wept.
Jesus wept back.
Crying is healthy for you.
You're listening to Men of Faith, the podcast dedicated to calling men up and not out. Join me as we live a life dedicated to our God. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Men of Faith podcast. And I'm excited because I have some incredible guests with me today. Two of my good friends and golfing buddies. So in the Men of Faith world, you need to make some noise right now. Wherever you are, in your car, you need to go crazy. Watching on YouTube, we've got Otis, Amey, and Jason Caine.
What's happening?
Amazing men of God. That people are going crazy right now, I know.
Appreciate it, man.
And so both these guys are pastors, leaders, and friends of mine, golfers, which is what we really connect over. Of course, over the Lord, but definitely over golf. But I want you to get to know them. So, Jason, tell us a little bit about yourself before we hear all your wisdom.
I'm the husband to Stephanie. We've been married coming up on 15 years in March, and we are the parents of twins that'll be 14 in a couple weeks. I can't believe we got 14-year-olds, but it's a beautiful thing.
Crazy.
Pastor of a church called Bayside Blue Oaks. Been there for 6 years. Prior to that, I lived in the city of Atlanta, where I grew up from age 10 to 34 when I moved out here. Was pastoring out there as well, church I grew up in. And thanks for having me on the pod, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Hotlanta, straight out of it.
Nobody says Hotlanta. Saying
They
Hotlanta
don't?
is like saying,
Dang, man.
like,
I thought I was with it.
yeah. Like
I'm not.
It's like saying San Fran, you know? I've learned you don't say that.
You say SF or the Bay?
I say
The
San
city.
Fran because I'm not from here.
All right, Jason, thanks for being with us.
Yeah.
And then we got Otis, Amey to his left.
Yes, sir. Otis, Amey, born and raised in the Bay Area. Always dreamed of playing for the 49ers. Was able to accomplish my childhood dream. Ended up marrying my high school sweetheart. We just celebrated 15 years of marriage. Got married on my birthday. Some people say that's dumb. Some people say that's smart. I say the latter. We have 3 beautiful children, 6, 9, and 12. Boy in the middle, just enjoying this season of life, even though there's always a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. We've seen God's hand in every part of it. It's been a blessing. Been a pastor at Midtown Church for about 3.5 years now, and have been overseeing a faith-based ministry called FCA for the last 10 years.
Yeah, so both these guys, a ton of experience in ministry. We actually all are similar ages, stages. I've been married for 16 years. You guys are right at 15.
Yeah, coming up on 15.
Coming up on 15. Our kids are around similar ages as well. We've been in ministry all like similar amount of time. We all played in the NFL.
Oh,
I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
Just Otis. But me and Jason, we're athletes in our own right.
100%.
So what I wanted to do, talking with these two amazing guys, not just are we friends, but I really look up to both of you. I admire your heart for the Lord, your leadership, but ultimately, I think what inspires me the most when I see your guys' lives are just your relationships with your wives and your children. I think a lot of people in ministry prioritize ministry, and they sacrifice their family on that altar of ministry. And I just see you guys doing it different. And I think ultimately, I know a lot of our listeners maybe aren't pastors or in ministry, but they can relate to maybe sacrificing family for work, sacrificing family for money, for all the material things that we think we need. And so I've seen you guys just, do it well in an area of life or a call that we have, which can be very demanding. So I want to just hear a little bit, and we want to talk in this episode about marriage and how we develop healthy marriages, but also healthy families, what you guys have maybe learned, what you've done, what you haven't done well.
Yeah.
Maybe you've probably made some mistakes. I know I have. So talk to me about, this journey of, and maybe we start with I know you guys both prioritize family. So what led you there? Did you see this modeled for you the wrong way, the right way? And how have you done that to the level you're doing it? Because I think you both are doing it well.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for, even pointing that out, man. As you know, we don't do that perfectly, but we do our best to do it. I think for me, I had the example set for me at home. My dad was in the military for 20-something years, and I didn't learn this till I was an adult, but he would never take an assignment that would keep him away from the home for an extended period of time. And so in many ways, he sacrificed career, could have gone on to be a colonel, lieutenant colonel, general, or whatever. But he knew that he wanted to invest his time in his family. So he made a lot of sacrifices in his career to make sure he was present with his family. And I think it paid dividends. I have 3 older sisters and myself. All of us are walking with the Lord now. And that's just a testament to my dad making that decision. Like, I'm going to be present and I'm going to be at home. And so I wanted to do the same thing for my kids. Like, I never want to spend all my time saving everybody else's family and losing mine. Like, I refuse to do that. I refuse to do that because I've had the example set for me, and I want to do what I can to make sure that my kids are walking with the Lord, that they don't hate the church, that they have a great relationship with their parent. As you mentioned, people watching this podcast, you may not be in ministry, but you have jobs. And look, be ambitious. Go after it. I would say all of us work hard.
Yeah.
But there's just I don't know if balance would be the right word, but there's a healthy amount of ambition that you can have while making sure you're taking care of your family. And I think that just comes also knowing seasons of life. My kids are about to be 14 now. When they were much younger, I had to sacrifice even more. But now that they're getting older, it's just a different season where I can really do the things that I want to do.
Yeah, I like that idea of balance. I actually have always said, like, I think balance is a myth because we never are fully balanced.
Yeah.
Like what I've seen is like almost like spinning plates. Like when one plate starts getting wobbly, I gotta leave this plate and go to that one, and then I spin that one, and then I go here, and you're never fully in balance, but you should be able to keep everything moving in a healthy direction, spinning, so to say.
I would say the idea that's better than balance is just rhythm.
Right? Yeah, that's good.
There's some rhythms sometimes where you gotta the rhythm is I gotta spend more time on my job. For like us, we're pastors. The Christmas season is December now.
Yeah.
I know I'm leaning in heavily to work, and my wife knows that, and my kids know that. But in November or in October, when it's slower, then I spend more time with them. So just really knowing the rhythms and communicating those with your spouses and with your kids helps you out.
Yeah, we just had a conversation last night. She's like, how many more times are you preaching this year? I said, 5 times. I'm guest preaching on the 29th. I'm preaching this Thursday. I'm preaching this Sunday. I just had a meeting with the men's, right? So it's different seasons, different rhythms. But she knows after I preach on the 29th, I'm going to be off for a week. So we have like the light at the end of the tunnel. And so Jason kind of touched on his upbringing. Mine was complete opposite. Pops was in the Army, but Pops was a raging alcoholic. So the cool thing in that story is that I saw my mom crying out to the Lord every single day. And so I didn't see Pops model how to be a man, but I saw my mom, she planted that seed and watered that seed of this is what it looks like to cry out to God. And I saw the fruit of that. Every single one of her sons, me being included, surrendered our lives to Christ. And then now I see my Pops leading Bible studies. He surrendered his life to Christ maybe 12 years ago. So he's the dad I always wished he was. When I wake up 6 o'clock in the morning, either he calls me or he sends me an encouraging text, right? So now I see what it looks like. And so I've always had this triangle. I don't think it's Pastor Rich is the one that I first saw this from, but it's like, here's Christ at the center, here's you, here's your wife, or any other relationship. If you guys want to get closer to Christ, if you guys want to get closer to each other, you got to get closer to Christ. And so I think about that in every single thing that I do.
Yeah.
I think it's funny you both were military kids. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about either of you.
Yeah.
I guess we're not as close friends as we thought.
I didn't know that about you, Otis. Did you know my dad was in the military? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we all learned about each other. My wife, her dad was in the Navy.
Okay.
And so they bounced around a lot. But it's interesting because, she didn't grow up in a ministry family, and you guys didn't either, but you grew up in families that at least one of your parents prioritized the house of God,
for sure,
and the people of God and the presence of God. And she fell in love with the church because of her parents' example, even though they were lay people and, they were working other jobs. They worked up until in the military up until they retired at the age of, 70 something years old. And it's crazy to me, like seeing all you guys and the examples that were set that gave you a love for the church. Yeah. So how have you instilled a love for the church or how are you trying to instill a love for the church in your family and children? Because obviously that was done for you or you wouldn't be pastors and leaders. So I'm curious because I was a pastor's kid, and most of, pastors' kids a lot end up hating the church or having some kind of broken relationship with the church. I've even seen it in my own siblings, So I'm curious, for you guys, what did you learn, from your parents and their love for the church that you're trying to maybe instill to your kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were that black family where my mom dragged us to church. It wasn't overwhelming like you hear some folks say. We was there Monday, Tuesday, like it was every Sunday, and then we had a midweek service. So there was a healthy balance of that and sports. So for me, I'm always praying about like what things can I don't. We force our kids to come now, but like there's other things where I'm like, let me be intentional about bringing my son to certain things. So when I spoke I'll always have love for this house here, Project Church, because my son gave his life to Christ. I get emotional thinking about it. Like, you invited me to speak here at boys' night, and I brought my son, and I wasn't going to bring him, and he gave his life to Christ here.
Wow.
So, like, praying about things like that for our kids is important. And just to confirm it, I ask my son, like, once a month, like, son, do you know Christ? He said, yeah, I gave my life to Christ at Project Church at boys' night. And he'll forever remember that.
That's
so I
dope,
think it's just having a healthy balance of, like, when they get to this age, not forcing them. Like with my 12-year-old daughter, I don't force her to go to every single thing that we do, but I'm always praying about, okay, God, what should I bring her to? So they can see daddy like doing ministry and be in love with it, not just the concept of him doing stuff for church, but them building their own relationship with the Lord.
Yeah. Man, have y'all noticed you get a whole lot more emotional as you get older? Otis out here crying, man. Since I turned 40, almost every Sunday I'm crying at church. Like, what is going on with me, man? But that's dope. I didn't know your son gave his life to Christ here. But I think that speaks to something that's valuable too. I think I can't take credit for my kids' love for the church. I think the villages that I've had them in, being great people, being around great people has helped. I think my parents instilled, so my dad actually, after he was in the military, he was a pastor of a church. And I just loved the church that we attended. Because I loved the people who were there, and we fellowship with those people. And so there was never a moment in time, like that was our family, and that was the community that we were around. So I just naturally grew a love for the church. So I don't know, even for myself as a parent, if I've just done things to instill it. I've just tried to get my kids around the right environments. And one of the things I love about being here in Sacramento is that the pastors are pretty close to each other. So my son and Caleb's son, we golf together. And having my kid around other pastors and people who can influence them. We were just playing golf with Coach Jerry.
Yeah.
And afterwards, my son was like, man, I love Coach Jerry. I'm like, this is what it is. It's about getting your kids around normal believers because they may not listen to you, but they'll listen to the people who are in your circle. And so just making sure I surround myself with positive people who love the Lord, who can set the example, who know how to have fun. Keeping my kids in those environments is valuable to me. I don't have to make my kids come to church with me. On Sundays, my church has 3 services, and they could just go to one if they wanted to, but they wake up with me in the morning, and they come at 7 o'clock, and I don't make them do it. They just naturally want to do it, and that's not credit to me. That's credit to the people who are part of the church and make them feel comfortable and valued. So
that's awesome.
I love that, you both actually addressed it, this idea of like with your kids, you're putting them in the right environments. Because I do think that there is a mistake that maybe a lot of the men that I know are making, or the men even listening to this podcast are making, of not putting them in the right environments. And they prioritize a whole lot of other things, and church is just this secondary, occasional thing that we involve our life, involve our family in, but it's never a priority. And I'm seeing this playing out more and more. And I mean, it concerns me when I think about the future of the church, when all these parents and men and women of God that, sports are more important, activities, traveling, like everything's more important. And then church is an occasional once every couple months. I mean, we know church attendance is at an all-time low right now, even for those who call themselves Christians and regular attenders. And so I think, what I hear from you guys and what I would want to instill to everyone listening is like, you have to prioritize getting your kids in the right environment. The presence of God and church is the right environment. And so I think there's a balance, right, of not like forcing it. But when they're younger, like I'm still forcing my kids, and my kids are 13, 11, and 9. But I'm like, you don't have a choice. You go. Now, you don't have to go to all 3 services, but you go.
Right.
And so that emphasis, I guess, that I see you guys saying too.
I mean, right now they say if you attend church 1.6 times a month, that's regular attendance, but you wouldn't get away with that with AAU or nothing else, right? So that's the big struggle that we see right now in the church. And I think about, like, if you say you're a professing Christian, the story that comes to mind is when I don't get how Jesus, how his parents left him, but then they go back and they find him, I think, at the age of 12, and they're marveling and they're amazed at his wisdom. And he says, "Didn't you know I'm about my father's business?" Like, as a young man. And so
Yeah.
there's something powerful in that story where it's like, of course I'm going to honor and respect the house of the Lord. Of course I'm going to be here.
Yeah. And I think, I want to be sensitive to parents out there whose kids don't have a great experience with church, or they do have to make them go.
Yeah.
Don't blame yourself for that. Like, I can't give myself credit for my kids' desire to be there. I'm sure I've done something right. But sometimes you just get a kid that just doesn't want to go. And I know that's a difficult thing. And I think trying to find an environment where they love, or trying to find some people who they can get around that can influence them, is valuable. But I would say the other thing that my parents did, we didn't sit down at home and do devotions like maybe a couple times in my life as a kid. But I just saw my parents live out their faith, right?
That's
I
good.
saw them be friendly and kind and loving and exhibit the fruit of the Spirit in people. And I think they say more is caught than taught. So just watching them be authentic in their faith set the example for me. And it wasn't us sitting down and doing a devotion. It was just me seeing my parents live what they were being taught at church. And that was the greatest example for me. I didn't see them being something different at home. Like, if you're yelling at your kids at the house and then you get at church and you got your hands raised in worship, they're going to question your authenticity. Like, man, Jesus ain't going to make you be kind to me at home. So you just live out your faith, I think, is a great thing to do.
Can I piggyback on that real
go.
quick? Sometimes the things that they catch, it won't be till years later. So I want to encourage any parent watching this, just remain faithful. So every day we would come downstairs and we see our mom. She'll have a coffee, water, Bible open. She was praying. She didn't sit us down. Like, I don't really ever remember her sitting us down doing devotionals. But those seeds were watered and planted. Like, oh, that's why you're able to be so strong. That's why you never got a divorce. That's why you're able to continue to endure.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the timing with God is perfect, and there are kids who exhibit, like you said, maybe a little more rebellious behavior. They're a little more adverse to church, but I think if we're setting the right example, putting them in the right environments, we know what the word says, right? If we train them in that way, when they're older, they won't depart from it. They will come back to it. I really believe that for those people listening that maybe they have a child that's wandering right now or pushing back on the faith. And I think even for my kids, there's, of the three, I would say one of them, I really trust and believe that, like, the relationship with the Lord is actually strong. And the other two, I'm like, you know what? It's just going to take some time. Some of it is maturity. Some of it is understanding. Some of it is age. And so I'm just being patient. And like you said, both of you said, like, I want to set an example that it's caught. And I think what you said was, if I'm yelling at my kids, I'm mean at home, and I'm raising my hand. What I think we've done well, because, I mean, I don't know about, your family. My family was very quiet, passive. Like, we don't argue. We don't raise our voices. But then I married a Filipino who, they are fiery, and it is passionate, and they love strong, but they also, that anger can rise up. And so one thing I think I've seen my wife do really well, which, I don't know, she doesn't really listen to our podcast, but, like, if she ever does, is she is quick to apologize.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that exemplifies the gospel more than anything, that I go, hey, she raised her voice, she yelled, she shamed them, which happens. They weren't listening. And then she goes, hey, guys, like, maybe a few hours later, an hour later, hey, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have yelled at you like that. I shouldn't have raised my voice. Here's why I was upset, but that's no excuse. So will you forgive me? I've heard her and watched her say, will you forgive me? And then we can exemplify that there's grace. And that's what the gospel's about. That's what church is about, right? Like, that we're not perfect. We're going to mess up. And yet we forgive one another. We love one another despite our failures. And that's why we need Jesus, if we're bringing them to the gospel. So I think one issue that I see parents make is they're unwilling to ever admit their failures, that they make mistakes. It's my way or the highway. I'm always right, even when I'm toxic and unhealthy. And, like, we have to exemplify what the Bible tells us to be, which is those who repent, those who confess our mistakes and our sins, those who ask for forgiveness, and then those who forgive.
Yeah, it's a humbling thing to have to go to your kids and apologize.
Yeah.
I hate it, but I do it because that's what the gospel calls us to do. But there are definitely interactions I have with my kids, and my wife will pull me to the side and be like, hey, just so you know, that came off harsh or whatever. And I listen to her and I go back and apologize. You eat the humble pie and you tell your kid that, because that's how you want them to behave. Again, it's modeling the behavior that you want them to have as well?
Since we started talking about our wives, let's shift gears. Actually, if ladies or men too, it's funny. A lot of women have been telling me they're listening to our podcast,
Okay.
The Men of Faith. So, ladies that are listening, make sure you're listening to the Sisterhood podcast as well that Chrissy has. But we had Stephanie, Jason's wife, on there a couple episodes ago. It was amazing. And so let's talk about our wives and our marriages for a second, because I think ultimately a lot of these guys, marriage right now is difficult.
Yeah.
I think a lot of marriages are struggling. We know, percentage wise, how many marriages are ending in divorce. And so, you just said something that kind of triggered it for me. I'm like, oh, that's different. That your wife goes to you and says, hey, how you came across was either wrong or not loving,
Yeah.
or could have been taken a different way. And you hear that from her, you receive that, and then you actually respond to it. So I want to talk about marriage and maybe what's helped you to maintain a healthy marriage. 15 years, that's incredible, right? Not many people make it there. So what's helped you guys to make it that far? And what are some of the tangible things you're even doing now to continue to grow your relationship?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that goes without saying, faith-based podcast is continuing to grow in my faith. And I remember one time she says, I feel like you're leaving me. So including her, some of my devotionals and Bible studies. But the practical thing, hands down, I don't have empirical data in front of me, but it's communication.
1,000%.
It's communication, bro.
Yeah.
So oftentimes in marriages, I believe it's because the man is not striving to love his wife like Christ loved the church. They're not sacrificing enough. So I had to get humble and get to the root of why are we having these tit for tat, this beef.
Yeah.
It's because I had to go back to the root of how I grew up with the pops that would come in the house. Like, you didn't say nothing to him or it was a problem. So I learned how to shut down. And so I took that into my marriage, and it wasn't healthy. So now, after years of Holy Spirit working on me, getting counseling, all this stuff, we talk instantly. So if she says something to me and she doesn't realize how she was moving when she said it, I'll go directly to her and be like, babe, how you just said that to me, I didn't like it. I used to never even use the word feelings. I don't got no feelings. What you talking about? So now I say, this is how you made me feel. We talk about everything. We don't go to bed angry at each other. So I would say, hands down, it's us communicating. We've been together for 24 years, since 2000, since high school, married for 15.
He wouldn't even say feelings. Now he's out here crying on podcasts.
You're right. He's Jesus wept.
Jesus wept back.
Crying is healthy for you. I think just tangibly. So the first 2 years of our marriage, we had babies right away. We had honeymoon babies. And so things got bad. It was bad. It was all about the kids. Everything was about the kids. Everything was about survival. And we had 2 of them at once. And I think what happens for some people, they have kids and they never recover from that. Because it's like this moment your wife goes from being a wife to a mom, and you can find yourself being jealous, like, hey, have you forgot about me? Like, I'm here too. But for the season, your kids kind of need her for, survival.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we recovered from that. And it was just this one guy reaching out to me saying, man, when's the last time you took your wife on a date? And I'm like, go on a date? We don't even like each other, man. And he was like, you got to go on a date with your wife. You got to do that regularly. And so we committed to doing what we should have been doing, although the feelings weren't there. And I think a lot of times people wait for the feelings to be there. If I feel like doing it, I do it. No, you do what's right because it's discipline. And then the feelings follow the discipline. Yeah. And so thankfully, after a period of time, 2 years, we had the twins, probably another year of us just dating, we were back in love again, and things have been going well. And I think we just spend time with one another. We prioritize making sure that we go out with each other, because if you don't do that and you don't prioritize it and you don't intentionally make it happen, then it won't happen. Life will just pass you by. You'll be like 2 ships passing in the night, living in the same house under the same roof, but having no interaction that's valuable, that can stoke and spark the flame that we all want to have.
That's so good. For Chrissy and I, the last couple of years have been the best years of our marriage. And we had 3 kids in 3 years, out the gate. And so it was just boom, boom, boom. And it was rough because, like you said, the kids get all the attention. They're so demanding. They need you for everything. And then we went through a season where I was very much like Otis. My family grew up this way. I mean, we don't process feelings. We don't talk about our feelings. We don't communicate. We just stuff. And I didn't realize how disconnected my wife was feeling from me just because I wasn't sharing with her what I felt. And I felt things, but I would just stuff it down because I'm like, I'm a man and I just got to be steady. And even if something hurts me or bothers me, I can't tell her that because number one, I look weak. Number two, she'll just get mad. You know, she'll get upset about it. But what I didn't realize is when I started actually doing that and telling her, hey, you made me feel this way. Actually, this hurt. Hey, I kind of resent you for this behavior. She received it incredibly well and actually felt closer to me. I'm like, I'm telling you you're trash right now. And you love me more because of it. Now, I wouldn't word it. I wouldn't be like, you're trash. I'd be like, hey, you made me feel like this. And she felt closer to me simply because she realized, number one, I feel something. Number two, I'm connecting with her on an emotional level, which I'd never done. And then number three, she knew what I needed too. And she told me at one point in our marriage, we were probably 10 years in, she's like, I don't feel like you need me for anything. And I was, besides physical, that's what she said. Besides physical, you don't need me for anything. And I literally responded as like, I said, you're right, I don't. And I was like dead serious. But what I didn't realize, and God began to work on me, is like, no, you need it. You need emotional connection. You need vulnerability. But I just lived a life of stuffing for so long, I didn't even know what that looked like.
Intimacy is more than sex, right? It's exposing yourself to the other individual. That's what you're saying you did with your wife. You told her how you were feeling, and so that drew her closer. Like, if you're frustrated with me, tell me so that I can do something about it. I think a lot of us live in frustration. We live in anger without even telling the other individual so that they can do something about it. Like, if you have desires or wants or needs, so a big thing my wife and I, we do when we're doing premarital counseling with people, we make them identify what their needs are and tell that to one another. Because if you don't communicate a need, you just got a wish out there that'll never be fulfilled.
I am expecting that we get it in 3 times a week.
Like,
then she can say, nah, player.
Right. Like, we got to have a real conversation about that. Let's communicate our needs to each other. But a lot of us don't even know what we need ourselves. Like, one of my needs, and your needs can be basic things. I need to watch sports. Like, if I don't watch sports,
I need to watch.
I feel empty inside. And so my wife knows that. And on Sunday afternoon, after I preach and I come home, she's not going to schedule us to have a party or something that's going on because she knows I got this need that I need to watch sports. So being able to communicate your needs is a huge part of it as well.
And knowing what you need and also what you have poured out. I mean, because on a Sunday, you've poured out so much mental, emotional, spiritual energy. You need something to refuel you.
100%.
And like a date, talking more is not going to do it. I just talked for 3 services, you know, for 45 minutes every time. Like, I need to just decompress and receive. And that's something that I've had to express to my wife too.
And let me just say something on these because people can get outrageous with this stuff.
For sure.
These are needs, not demands. And you gotta be reasonable with your needs as well, right? Look, you can't be like, I need to watch sports 7 days a week. Or, like, come on, man, when you gonna have some time for your family? So you gotta be realistic with it, but you gotta communicate them.
Well, and if we're called to be selfless and sacrificial and love our wives as Christ loved the church, we're gonna maybe even give up some of our
100%.
wants that maybe aren't even needs for what she needs. And that's what I found in my life. I was probably prioritizing myself in too many ways and not giving her what she needed. She needed emotional connection, but I was too selfish to even try. And so when I made that shift, boom, then suddenly there was a deeper level of connection. And it's why we've been so healthy, our marriage, the last couple of years. And I've found for me that I am just doing what was modeled for me. And so I had to start talking to some people that saw things different than me. Like you said, you were challenged to do a date night. I needed someone in my ear and in my life that would challenge me to think different about my relationship. And so that's another thing I think we need, probably more relationships, accountability with other men that can challenge us in a way that we aren't normally challenged. I mean, since I made this somewhat transformation in the last few years, I can't tell you the amount of guys I've had conversations with, and I've been able to give them and put them on the same game that has changed my marriage. And they needed to hear that from me. They needed to hear, like, when was the last time you had a date night? For me, it was that I consistently, for us, every Friday now, we go either get breakfast or lunch, depending on when I'm playing golf. And she knows I need that, and she lets me do that. But I also prioritize her, and I'm spending 2-3 hours with her. And at that meeting, it is intentional where I'm going, okay, let's talk about what we've been feeling, what the Lord's been speaking to us. What are some things that you've been struggling with. I'm asking her questions. How can I better serve you? Like, I'm intentional in those connection points to ask her, what does she need from me, and what am I not meeting? When am I not meeting those needs?
Yeah, it goes back to the communication piece, especially after pandemic. A lot of people are working more remote. They have a lot of more flexibility in their work schedule. So for us, it doesn't have to be Sunday evening, but for us, it's like a quick 15, 20 minutes, sometimes 30-minute at most meeting where we just say, what's going on this week?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, okay, when are you going to golf this week? I know you're going to go somewhere. Okay, so like you said, Friday, we're going to grab lunch. We're going to grab dinner. Now the blessing is our kids are old enough, we leave them at home, right? So
For sure.
I can spend a little bit more money at dinner, right? So
You ain't down $100 before you leave.
Man, I don't spend $150, then have to drop another $80 when I get home. So it goes a long way. We're just talking about everything throughout the week, and it saves those potential arguments throughout the week.
And you got to have these regular check-ins, right? Like, I don't want anybody to think that all of us do this perfectly. We don't.
No,
I mean,
for sure.
A couple weeks ago, my wife had to tell me very similar thing that your wife told you. Like, you're out and about, and I don't see you, and then when I talk to you, you're not paying attention. And it just was a reminder, like, okay, let me lock in. Let me make sure that I'm paying attention to my wife and make her feel valued. So we don't do this perfectly, y'all.
Yeah, we don't. What I've learned is I just got to listen better, because they will tell us what they need. We just don't always pay attention.
Sure.
So when my wife, every once in a while, she'll be like, we haven't had a date night in a while. And I used to be like, what do you mean? We just did one, and we have lunch or breakfast every Friday. Now I go, oh, you know what? You're right. And then I'll literally go on the calendar and put one on the calendar. I put it on there, not her. I'm not waiting for her to plan things. And that's what I see too many men doing. Well, if you want it, then just do it. Schedule it for us.
Right.
They want us to take initiative. They want us to prioritize them. And so that's one thing I've learned is the second she says something, even around the house, hey, I really would like this to get done. By the end of the week, I'm making sure it's on my list and I'm doing it. And she's seeing that I'm prioritizing her. She's not having to remind me. Now, sometimes she does because I miss things. Like I just told the story last Sunday. I took a year to install our Ring doorbell cameras.
Yeah, you posted that. Shame
12 months later, bro. But I did it. But I mean, that was a situation where I'm just saying I'm trash. I didn't want to do something, and I just kept putting off. And she was increasingly frustrated. I finally did it. But man, that I would listen better. That's what I think as men, we just need to be a little more aware, listen a little better. When they ask for things, we go, you know what? Let me make a change.
Yeah, for sure.
Not get stuck in my pride and go, but you, nah, you know what? Let me give you what you need.
Yeah, there's I want to ask this question: how do we help our wives and whoever's listening? How do we help them grow spiritually? But I was thinking about this, like, there's this saying, it's not biblical at all, happy wife, happy life. It is great practical wisdom in most cases, but not every single time. Like,
For sure.
Adam should not have listened to Eve, right? So that's the example I'll give you right away. But anyway, that's a whole another deal. How do you guys help your wives grow spiritually? Because I was even thinking in the context of us, we have a good amount of small groups, but some people won't want to start one because we use the word leader. So we just changed it to facilitate. So I just came from a small group right now, and all I did was say, hey, read John chapter 2, verse 1 through 11. They did it for 3 minutes, and we just had a great discussion. What did God just show you?
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm starting to do that more with my wife. Like, read this, let's read it together, and just...
So you're talking about how to help our wives grow spiritually.
Yeah, I guess it's different for you. Your wife's one of the pastors here, and she's preaching, so...
She still needs to grow spiritually. Come on.
My wife more spiritual than me, so.
So she's right now talking on some podcast going, how do I help Jason grow more?
Maybe to the person, to the dude that's listening.
Yeah, no, I think it's a mutual thing, right?
Yes.
You set the example of... It's easy for us to say prioritize church. It's literally our job. We're going to be there. But I think knowing when to encourage and when to challenge is a valuable thing. That both, I need that from my wife too. That's why it's kind of hard for me to answer the question, because I think my wife helps me grow spiritually. But it's setting the example as well. Like, if you read something that's good, bring her along.
Yeah.
If you see an article, we have questions or we have things that we ask one another about theology. And there again, it's not us sitting down doing a Devo together. While it may be what would work for some people, it's just about our conversation and prioritizing things and challenging each other at the right time.
Yeah, I know that there's some couples that pray together consistently. To be honest, Chrissy and I have never really done that, or do devotions together consistently. We've never done that. my relationship with the Lord was very individualistic. And so when we got married, it frustrated her a ton. Because I read the Bible every day. I read through the Bible in a year every year. And I've been doing it for years. And I wasn't wanting, when she asked me, I'm like, I don't want to do devotions with you. Like I need my time with the Lord.
Weren't you just talking about listening to your wife?
No, but again, I needed to connect with God, like me and him.
Yeah.
And bringing her into it, I feel like, well, now I'm hearing your thoughts more than I'm hearing the Lord's. And so I need my own time with the Lord. So what I think, what we've grown into, we do pray together, weekly now. What we've grown into now is that every week when we connect, we talk about what the Lord's been speaking to us. So there's always a conversation in our lunch or breakfast where we go, what's the Lord been speaking to you? What have you been learning? And then the other thing, and this is funny, because I think social media can be a bad thing, but it can also be a good thing. We send each other reels almost daily.
Oh, all day.
That are sometimes funny, a lot of funny ones, but we also send each other spiritual ones, theological ones, ones that are for her, or she'll send me ones that she thinks are for me, and then we'll discuss it. And that has been actually a great point of connection for us, where we almost every day are talking about something theological. And she'll send me something and I'll be like, I don't agree with this. Or I'll send her something and be like, I don't agree with this either. What do you think? And then there's times she's challenged me and I'll be like, oh, you know what? You're right.
Yeah.
And so I think me leading my wife spiritually is making sure that I'm prioritizing having spiritual conversations on the regular, which for us is weekly. The reels have become a great point of connection for us, where we talk about something we're hearing from a pastor or a leader. And then that we are in unity in our home as to what direction we're going. And that's the calendaring, the vision, all those kind of things.
I would say my wife and our spiritual connection is best when there is something that we're doing in faith. So good. When we were contemplating making a move from Atlanta to California, we were just in sync, praying about it, trying to process what that looks like. And the few times that we've been able to purchase homes, it's just a project we had to go to the Lord on to help us with. Right now, our big one is we're trying to get out of debt. And so because we have this project that we're working on in faith and bringing God into it, that helps our spiritual connection as well. Like doing something in faith together, chasing a dream, chasing a vision on what God has put into your heart, that has been probably one of the most formative things. Like when we got pregnant, I told her I wanted to pray for twins, and she's like, "You crazy?" But I felt the burden from the Holy Spirit, like, y'all need to pray for twins. And I told her that, and she's like, all right, I'm on board. And so things like that, doing things in faith, has really helped, I think, form both of us spiritually.
That's good. You need to pray for more people, bro. Man, prayed for twins that got twins.
It's crazy, man. How about you, Otis? How would you answer that question?
I would just piggyback on what you said. So, retired from playing professional football in 2012. Got into network marketing, trying to figure out who am I now, my identity, how am I going to provide for my family. Hard work and discipline was already there, but what am I going to do? What's my purpose and calling? Way before, stepping into being a pastor. But just now we're entering this season where she's building with me. So I used to just do stuff and be like, babe, you're not supporting me. Now it's just okay, you get asked to speak all the time. She gave me the green light to pay. I'm not going to give you the amount for the website. She's going to help me with the booking. She can do a lot of the back stuff. This is the first time they were actually building something together. In faith. And so the vision that I see God gave me, I see it slowly coming to pass.
Yeah. Do something in faith with your wife. Figure out a project. Y'all spend some time in prayer. 2025, this is what we want to tackle together. And it's going to grow you. It's going to be challenging, but it's going to grow you. The Bible says without faith it's impossible to please God. So do something in faith together. It'll be pleasing to God and it'll be formative to your relationship.
I think it's funny that you brought this conversation up of what are you doing to, lead your wife spiritually, strengthen her spiritually? Because this week, my wife actually was talking to me and she's like, I just wonder, I just have never seen you undone in the presence of God, and this is, my wife is very much when you say your wife is more spiritual than you, my wife definitely is on some levels. And then other levels, she's not, right? I think that we strengthen one another. I'm not saying she's less than. I'm just saying where I'm stronger are some of the areas that she's weaker, and where she's stronger are some of the areas where I'm weaker. I'm not going to be the guy in a worship service, on my face, crying, bawling my eyes out. It's not naturally my personality. Has it happened? Yes, it actually happened this last year. But it's rare. But she's that way all the time, right? just loves the presence of God, and God just encounters her in a powerful way. So she was saying to me this week, like, I just don't see you undone, but I love when I see you worshiping, and the few times I've seen you on your knees. And I realized that, like, for my wife, and I think a lot of the wives out there, because let's be real, a lot of these guys probably that are listening, they maybe are not as demonstrative, even physically, in worship services.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is my wife just wants to see that I'm going after God. And so I think we all could do better at, like, physically exemplifying our pursuit of God. When my wife sees me reading my Bible every day, she knows, right? He prioritizes God. When she sees me in the prayer rooms at our church, she knows. When I'm in a worship set in service and I'm lifting my hands, she knows. It may not be natural for a lot of you guys out there that are listening and watching, but what I've been challenging our church with is we give God his priorities, or not preferences. We give God his preferences, not our preferences. His preference is that we lift holy hands, sing unto the Lord, shout, clap our hands, all these things in worship, even if it's not natural for you because you're a dude and you're reserved and, like, I'm a guy's guy, I'm not a music guy. Ultimately, I'm giving God his preferences. And what I've seen is that the more I do that, the more my wife sees, like, oh, wow, I'm seeing physically that he loves the Lord. And that leads her to trust me, because she still submits as the head of our household. She'll be the first to tell you that. Even though at times people would say, oh, well, she's the more spiritual one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I say my wife is more spiritual, like, not in the way that she worships, but in the way she behaves. Like, she's a godly person. I am too, but she's just
like, Jason, you're godly.
and
Come on, bro.
giving and humble, and those things aren't, like, natural attributes that I have, right? I gotta go out of my way to be kind. You know, my wife, she's just a selfless person. I'm a selfish person, and I gotta work my way to be what God has called me to be. So that's what I mean when I say more spiritual.
Well, hey, you drove from Roseville down to Old Sacramento to be on a podcast with your friend with no promise of any monetary blessing.
I don't even expect one.
And so I'd say you're pretty selfless.
Hey, anytime I get some time with y'all, man. I'd rather be on the golf course, though.
Quick side note, just touching on the whole worship piece. Literally, this is, like, heavy on my heart right now. I was talking to our worship leaders yesterday about this. Just, like, I'm more demonstrative on Thursday nights when I'm preach. I'll be at the front of the altar during worship until I got to go back and get ready to come out.
Yeah.
But there's just something in the current church, not blanket statement. There's, like, this lack of, I don't know if it's, I don't know what it is, connection with God, real relationship with God, to where I feel like during worship, you should be doing something.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if you're sitting down contemplating, if your hands raised, on your face, whatever, but to just stand there.
Oh, bro.
And be like this during worship.
The stare is wild.
I don't get it. So,
well, you're being disobedient biblically.
Yes, there's that. I think there needs to be, I'm sure you guys have already done it, like a sermon series on worship. I think some of it is just people don't know what they don't know, right? They don't know about offering the sacrifice of praise. They don't know what worship really is. They might think it's just singing. A lot of people show up to services with more of a consumeristic mindset and not I'm contributing, not consuming. Anyways, that's heavy on my heart. I think for men, I think a lot of men struggle with it. They struggle with appearances, but I'm like, if you can't worship freely at church, then how are you gonna be a Christian when you leave from here? This is a safe space.
Yeah, it's. So I grew up Black church, very demonstrative. Every Sunday, everywhere, like everybody. Not everybody, but 90% of the people are participating. Like, we're an expressive people. Now I pastor a church that is diverse but predominantly white, and you do get a lot of the stares, the looks, and I think, as you said, there's an education piece of it, right? And then there's just a cultural piece where people's culture makes them reserved in some ways. But you can teach them that it's okay to do these things, to demonstrate your worship to God. So it's a tough one that we have to work on.
I think we have to call out the hypocrisy on both sides, right? Because I've seen very demonstrative churches, and I'm like, I know a lot of these people, and their faith and their life does not back up the demonstrative nature of their worship.
They raising hands on Sunday, throwing hands on Monday.
Yes.
Right.
And so there's that.
Yeah.
But then there's the hypocrisy on the other side of, like, these reserve churches, and I mean, we have it in our church too, where you're out there at your kids' game screaming, acting a fool, like getting in coaches' faces, and then you're going to games like the Niners and you're painting your face and shouting and rejoicing and dancing in the aisle. But then for a Niner game or a Kings game, but then you go to church and it's blank stare, I don't move. Oh, it's my culture. Like, no, because actually your culture allows you to be demonstrative in other environments. So ultimately, I think there's maybe a lack of education, but I think we're teaching our people. I think it's a lack of obedience. And so we're going to end right now, but I want you each to give a call up to these guys, because something we do on our podcast, the Men of Faith podcast, is we give a call up, not a call out. So we don't call men out. We call them up. We call them higher. We call them to greater levels. So we're talking to husbands. We're talking to men. We're talking to leaders of their home and their children. And so I think ending on that topic, and then I'd like you guys to give them a call up on whatever you want to give them a call up on. I like to call up guys when it comes to the example they're setting for their children and their wives in church. First of all, prioritizing it. And second of all, when they're here, that they're setting an example physically of what it means to worship. Even the idea of getting your family up early enough so you can make it to church on time. That to me shows priority, right? And I know it's hard, and sometimes kids are crazy and they don't get ready. I have that problem with my kids. But if I'm prioritizing it, I'm motivating the family to get going. I'm not waiting on my wife to get us going. I'm prepping. I'm letting the kids know, lay your clothes out because we're going to church in the morning. My wife's seeing me lead that charge, right? She's not the one that has to push us to prioritize the house of God. So that's my call up. And I heard someone say this. I heard them say, if we make church optional for our families and our children, then when they grow up, for our kids, it will be unnecessary. And that rocked me, because I'm seeing a generation where church is optional. For our kids, it's optional. Sports are the priority. All the other things we're doing are the priority. And I do believe that these kids are going to grow up and it's going to be unnecessary, because it was optional for us. Now when I grow up, it's unnecessary. And so we have to change that, men. So lead your family by leading them to church, leading them to prioritize the house of God, getting them in the right environments. And I believe you'll reap dividends in fruit. Call up. What you got?
All right. You could have let us know ahead of time. That's what we're going to be doing.
I know, this is better this way, though.
Good. Here's mine. There's a conversation that you've been putting off for a long time.
Come on.
That if you had the courage to have, would change your life. It won't be an easy conversation, but when you have the conversation, it would change your life, because you'll be able to put some things in place so that you'll be able to have success. For me in this past year, the conversation I've been putting off is how my wife and I spent money. They say some people are spenders, some people are savers. We both like to spend. We both like to spend.
That's tough.
So we finally had a conversation about budget, and it was a hard one, because when you see I'm spending this amount of money on food every week, what am I doing? It's not easy to know, but at least I know where I am, and we've been able to make changes in the past 2 months that I think will revolutionize our lives, have revolutionized our lives, and will change our lives going forward. So whatever you've been hesitant to have a conversation about and make some changes, have the courage to have that conversation, because a better life is on the end of that conversation.
That's so good. I love it. Otis,
yeah, for me, I've been wrestling with a lot of guys that now are successful. And so there's this quote we've been just navigating through. It's hard times create strong men create good times create weak men. So like me and my wife coming from nothing, and now every single one of our kids has their own room. They don't know what struggle is. They have clothes, they have Nintendo Switches, they have everything. So it's like, how do we create strong children? And it's by them really having an intimate relationship with Christ. My favorite word is abide. So I was thinking about the wedding at Caine, and just really quick, my call up to men is like what you see in the servants. So there's a whole thing we could dive into about why did Jesus choose to reveal himself to these servants, however many it was. But what you see is that when Jesus says it's not my time, his mom ignores him and says, do whatever they say. And at the end of verse 8, there's 3 powerful words that says, they did so. They didn't complain about, this doesn't make any sense. Like, we're out of wine. Why don't I go get some more wine? They just faithfully did what Jesus told them to do. We don't know when the water turned to wine, but we want to see God move. We want to see the miraculous, but oftentimes we miss out on the miraculous or on the blessing because we we are too smart in and of our own strength, right? So
Yeah.
they just did what Christ told them to do. They filled the water jars up to the brim. They took it to the master of the banquet, not knowing that it had already turned to what moment is going to turn to wine, and they saw the miraculous happen. And so what I see is that they were humble, and they were faithful, and they were obedient, and they saw God move. So my call up to men is to just remain humble, trust what God is telling you to do, regardless if it doesn't make sense in that moment, and be faithful and obedient with what God has placed in your hands to be steward over, and watch God move.
I love it. Well, hey, thank you guys for joining me on the Men of Faith podcast.
Thanks for having
We'll
us.
definitely have to have you guys on again.
We'd love to come back, man.
This was a
Yes,
great
sir.
conversation. We could keep going, but like we want to keep it under a certain amount of time.
That time flew by.
So thank you guys. And so, hey, thanks everybody for listening. This is season 2. So that's why it looks a little different. We're going to be hitting on all different types of topics. We'll have Otis and Jason back on another time as well. So do us a favor right now. You can like and subscribe on our Project Church YouTube channel. There is a link on there for the podcast, so you can watch all these. If this has spoken to you, share it. Also share it on Spotify, iTunes. You can watch on all of those. And then follow us on Instagram, Men of Faith Pod. We'd love to have you on there interacting with us. We post clips on there. We'll be posting some clips from this. And so love you guys. Thanks for joining us on Men of Faith, and we'll see you next time. Grace and peace.